Hello everyone, in this section of tonight's workshop I'll be looking at minor melody. Minor melody could easily take up an entire workshop, so I'm just going to focus on a few sticking points that seem to arise very often. They are what to do in bar 7 and 8, do we modulate or not modulate, how to plan for and treat the sequence, approaches to dealing with the raised 7th degree of the minor scale, and finally discussing a few approaches and tips to help our students not run out of steam at the end of their melody. And in the final section of the presentation, I'll be taking you through a lesson plan that I've devised that brings in other components of the composing paper, that is questions 5, 6 and even a bit of 4. I would envisage this being used at the start of 6th year or as an approach to introducing minor melody. While I do use music technology as a basis for this lesson, there is no reason why it can't be done in a more traditional setting. I would also like to use tonight as an opportunity for us to share all of the tips and tricks we have as teachers. Please feel free to use the chat function throughout this presentation to share your own approaches and tips and tricks on minor melody writing. As you all know, there is no obligation or requirement to modulate in the minor melody question. There are pros and cons to this approach. The pros are as follows. Students will be familiar with having to modulate in bars 7 and 8 from their study of the major melody question. This gives them a sense of structure, direction, and what to do in the A1 phrase. The cons are this. You risk confusing the weaker students in your class group by giving them A, too many options, and B, a different modulation to have to think about. Having looked at the pros and cons, I'm now going to go through 3 possibilities I cover with my students. It's at this point that I'd like to invite you again to offer your own approaches and methodologies in the chat function below. The first option I'll cover is the relative major modulation. The second is an imperfect cadence in the given minor key. And the third is a perfect cadence in the given minor key. An Aural approach to this would be allowing your students to hear each example and even getting them to sight sing each example, and then entering a class discussion on what they think sounds best. Here's the relative major modulation. Here is the imperfect cadence in the given minor key. And here is the perfect cadence in the given minor key. As a teacher, one of the problem areas that I find in most of my students' work is in the sequence phrase from bars 9 to 10. They oftentimes will have a lovely melody written in bar 9, and when it comes to bar 10 and applying a sequence to it, they encounter an unwanted interval like an augmented 2nd or an augmented 4th, or an approach to the raised 7th that doesn't fit or sounds out of place. It is in this context that I think planning for a sequence is very important. As with everything up until this point, I'm going to offer an approach that I take, but again, please share your own approaches to the sequence part of the minor melody below. So what you can see now on screen is a set of sequences that begin on Mi and a set of sequences that begin on Do. All of the Mi sequences are the same and all of the Do sequences are the same. What I've done though is apply them to the 3 time signatures 4/4, 3/4 and 6/8. A side note to say that, and I found a very useful exercise for my students, is trying to rewrite rhythms from one time signature into another. I find this helps with note value alignment and also with a sense of what the rhythm sounds like against the underlying pulse of a particular time signature. Let's have a listen to the sequences. When it comes to the raised seventh, I try to make it as simple as possible for my students. At the outset, I do believe that taking an aural approach is very important to solidify the concept that the leading note tends to want to rise. So I would play them the tonic chord, and then I would hand them out a sheet with 3 aural observations. Aural observation 1 is simply the leading note, the raised seventh in a minor key, resolving to the tonic in a minor key. In this case, A minor. And then the second 2 observations deal with leaping to and from the raised seventh degree, and the second is stepwise movement to and from the leading note. And what is the likely aural outcome in each case? When leaping to and from the raised seventh degree, I try to get my students to do it from a chord note within chord 5. And I also include at this point a note to students to say that the likely note to follow a leap to the leading note is the tonic. In the stepwise movement approach, I'm keeping it simple again. C, La, La, C, and Fi, C are the 3 options I give my students. The latter of these 3 brings me nicely to the next topic, and that is finishing our melodies on a strong note. So now we come to the last phrase. Again, just to highlight a problem area I've found with a lot of my students over the years, and that is running out of steam or just running out of ideas or imagination in the final phrase. I find that a lot of the time my students like a task-based approach. That is, giving them something to actively do in each phrase. So I'm going to share the challenge that I give my own students, but again I would encourage you to share your own ideas around this area. So in bar 15 to 16, I construct the perfect cadence around the melodic idea Mi, Fi, Si, La. That is the rising melodic minor scale from the 5th degree of the melodic minor scale, landing on high La in bar 16.